Yeah. Well, good evening, good day, good afternoon, depending where you are. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Fakudze Qwabe. I'm your host on this platform of Amandla Omnotho. Thank you for taking time to be with us this evening. This is usual sessions of Amandla Omnotho, wherein we sit and talk about entrepreneurship, economic development, and general political economic issues, things that really concern us as citizens in the main around entrepreneurship and us starting businesses. So I'm very happy today that you've managed to join us. Just want to, whilst I'm multitasking, check some of the things I'll need to have on my screen as we are starting this session. And we will be welcoming a whole lot of people as we move, but in the interest of time, let's just make sure that we start and make sure that we cover as much during this session. We are living in exciting times, very interesting times around issues of the world politics, geopolitics, as those in the know call it, where we're seeing change happening right in front of our eyes. We are a generation that is witnessing some of the key milestones of our times when we see the multilateral or multilateralism being really the order of the day, and change is happening wherein countries want to assert themselves, whether in a way of making sure that they retain and reclaim their sovereignty, or in a way of making sure that they really put their foot down when it comes to who they think they are and the power they possess, in terms of economic power, that is. And we are living in times where we have seen this wave of changes happening since the 1900s, especially after the Second World War. For some, you would recall certain institutions that got started, like the World Bank, the IMF, and quite a lot of other institutions subsequent, which were all meant to try and deal with challenges of countries and continents, so that we do not have situations that led to, for instance, the Second World War. And we saw the United Nations being as well started. Those institutions, they were obviously started in the US, and we saw the emergence of the United States of America as the big economy and big power that really, truly speaking, is the one that's running the world, as it were. And as I said in my introduction, it's the big market. Whether you like it or you don't, every country wants to sell to the US because that's the big and the richest market. And the level of entrepreneurship there is at another level, because, I was sharing with some people about our own country vis-a-vis other countries. When you just do the comparison in terms of the entrepreneurship, exercise and what is happening in each of the countries, we're just looking and making comparisons, of course, trying to compare apples with apples as well as oranges with oranges, and looking at the amount of resources that we have in our country that should curb these highest levels of unemployment and inequality and crime that has become so rampant. I was in Durban recently. I heard there is now a gang called the West. You see young people at the age of 12 or 22 doing horrendous things, similar to Attila the Hun, things that are so much unprecedented, and that are a result of a society that does not seem to be finding a solution for over 65% of the youth that is unemployed. And this is seriously an issue that I think even on this platform, when we bring you speakers and talk about issues and engage on entrepreneurship and economy as a whole, we seek to actually assist us to find a solution. Not that entrepreneurship is a silver bullet, but it's one of those very key measures we believe in our country. It is a sort of like solution that can help curb a lot of ills. Actually, when you look at the periphery, where the ills that we have, the sickness in our society, and the crime that we have, and everything. I talked to somebody in the Eastern Cape as well. He said, "Hey, now abantu bangena just in broad daylight or at night or whenever they want and just take the livestock, and nobody knows when is all of this going to ever be solved." But we hope. Maybe that is what our problem is, that we hope and pray and not do anything. But we hope and pray and do here on this platform, and make sure that each of us, is not just complaining, but we talk about what solutions can we bring. And for us here on Amandla Omnotho, Operation Kaya, Rural Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we believe entrepreneurship is one such solution that we have. Deal with a number of things. Can deal with a number of things in Eswatini. It can deal with a number of things in Zimbabwe. It can deal with a number of issues in Nigeria. We've got a lot of our brothers and sisters who are joining us from those countries as we speak. Actually, right at the end, I would like to have my Nigerian friends have something here to say in terms of our forthcoming launch of Amandla Omnotho in Nigeria. So today, I don't want to waste much of your time, but I want to introduce a big brother and a friend and somebody that is an American, and he is a passionate zealot when it comes to the development of our continent, particularly our country, that is South Africa. And I've had a pleasure to be hosted by him in the US a couple of years ago, where we went to really seek a partnership that he, as an American, had actually arranged that we go and sort of like have over there, especially in Wisconsin. And he's the man that I highly regard and respect. Actually, he is called Qwabe Pakatwayo. So maybe if he so wishes, he can tell you how did he get that Qwabe surname. It's Joseph L. Davis Sr. He is a South Africa Honorary Consul for the state of Wisconsin in the United States of America, and the president and the CEO of Qwabe Enterprises. He desires to empower people through investments and building solid businesses that fuel the construction industry. That person is ready to empower, a lot of people to become a driving force in their public service space, and as well as law enforcement, disaster management, and construction careers. Worked on various multi-million-dollar projects and has created international relationships through creative thinking of long-term economic growth strategies. He has vast experience in global trade, international relations, and capacity building in the construction industry. He has worked with top domestic and international architects, developers, engineers, and contractors throughout his career. But his most important passion is building innovative entrepreneurs on the continent of Africa in the construction industry. He's currently seated on the board of directors of CASNET International Chamber of Commerce. CASNET being involved in construction, agriculture, supply chain, natural resources, energy, textiles, and technology. I'm very happy that he is a man that is behind us as Amandla Omnotho and a member of Amandla Omnotho too. And we have signed groundbreaking with him, including more youth, to be able to take a lot of young people to America and get them trained. I was talking to some of my Afrikaner friends recently, and they were telling me that there is 12,000 young South Africans in America, many of which are white South Africans, very few, if at all, Black South Africans. I'm mentioning Afrikaner friends because stressing that point, because we know what has been happening in America. We hear the president talking about stopping the aid, which is under the USAID and PEPFAR fund that we started under President Bush. That's really caused a lot of outcry, not because it's really huge amounts of money that South Africa can't afford, but because of the impact that withholding of funds will have in the lives of many people, as well as the AIDS sort of people who have got HIV rather. And you all know the story. This is something that is on the news being discussed between our two countries. And we hope that all of that is going to try and knit it together for us and give us really what a picture and a view of what's happening out there in the US, and maybe the opportunities. You know, whenever there are serious problems like this, sometimes we tend to focus much more on problems and forget about this alone brings an opportunity. As I give over to him, I want to say this. South Africa is like an economic province of many countries. Let me qualify this. In South Africa, we send cars to the United States, duty-free, and much more other products under the AGOA, which is very, very interesting. And in that, we have got Toyotas being built in South Africa or assembled, as well as VW in the Eastern Cape and BMWs in Pretoria. And my biggest concern, as much as I'm happy that we've got people getting jobs and all of these cars being assembled here and then shipped to the United States, the big question that I will ask even the engineers who are here, Madela and your team, we've got the Engineering League of Progress here, and is why are we simply assembling other models and cars that come from different countries and not have our own car? And this has been mind-boggling for many years. And I think we've got CSIR and got huge capabilities in terms of research, but we seem to be just economic provinces of other countries, such that if AGOA were not to be renewed this year, Mr. Davis Qwabe will tell us about all of those things. I don't necessarily think it's going to be South Africa that will suffer. Other countries who have made us an economic province as a country are going to suffer as well. So, Mr. Davis Qwabe, over to you, my brother. Please open a video for us as you take us through your presentation.
Thank you, Nkosi. I appreciate it. And you know that I always have a heart for those kind remarks when you introduce me. I think if anybody knows my whole purpose on how I got involved in South Africa, you would know it, because we spent a tremendous amount of time together. So yes, and before I move forward, I'm gonna not delete my screen, but I'm going to close my screen for the bandwidth, because I don't know if, as we go through the meeting, it may end up interrupting the audio. So this is who I am, and I'll get into my remarks. The first thing I want to address, I just want you to sit back and kind of relax a little bit, because there's been a lot of tension going on between both countries, South Africa, the Republic of South Africa, and the United States of America. So on a light note, Nkosi asked me to share how I got my Qwabe as a honorary consul. I was looking for, not searching, but look for a wife, and I found her there in South Africa. And during our wedding, my dad, Advocate Morani, gave his remarks because we had never met, but he had already knew my heart. So he opened up his remarks saying that my son has now found his way back home, but he's going to have a clan name. And he says, I hereby give him the name Qwabe. Now, when that moment happened, I knew that it was going to be a significant moment. But sometimes, as you know, when you name your child, or it means a significant blessing unto you, and it becomes all of those characters that you have sought to discover. And so my journey in South Africa has been very fulfilled based upon that whole premise. And my lovely wife, she's from KZN, Magugu. She is the precious one that I have been blessed to have as a wife. And here in the United States, I think she's making very, very great strides with our plan to eventually find out how we can be more aggressive on supporting our brothers and sisters in South Africa. So I got my commission as the Honorary Consul on June 1st, 2008 by President Thabo Mbeki. At that time, the Consul General was Consul General Yusuf Omar. We embarked on a lot of trade back and forth, delegations, but most importantly, he gave me a history of how South Africa at that particular time back in 2008, if you remember, the Obama administration coming in, and it was a transition in the ANC leading up to its elective conference. And so we worked very hard to make sure that we wanted to give South Africa the best foot forward. And for you politicians that are on here, I once was a politician, but I am not going to get into politics. But one of my best piece of legislation was to introduce it to our city and our state to take. At that time, Madiba was on, as you know, the terrorist list, and the ANC was considered a terrorist organization. And what we did was we introduced it here in Wisconsin to rescind that. And our congressperson actually took it into Capitol Hill and got that passed. So there's a lot of synergy between what I do here in the United States and the state of Wisconsin and South Africa. But with all of that being said, we're at a crossroads right now. There's no doubt about it. Over the years, we've had some very good working relationships. As you know, in 1994, America had two sides of the hand, right? One side of the hand was working to eliminate the apartheid government, but the other hand was there working against America and trying to hide a lot of the atrocities. And so with that, as you move forward, you find that now, 30 years after 1994, there's going to have to be some soul searching done between both countries. And I can tell you, in the United States, it has become a lot more of protectionism. And I'll get into that. And one of the main reasons why is the US dollar. Inflation here in this country is getting out of control. And the prices of just about every commodity is starting to rise. And how this all came about, and I'm glad Nkosi talked a little bit about the history in 1944, where the US dollar became the world dominant reserve currency, primarily due to a combination of historical events and economic power and political influence. And so at that time, the Bretton Woods Agreement, 1944, countries came together after World War II when the economy, our economy was in disarray. I mean, in 1944, representatives for the 44 allied nations, they met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, remember that, to establish a new international monetary system. Out of that, the Bretton Woods system established the US dollar as key global currency pegged gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. And as you know, anybody can get gold for $35 an ounce right now. I want to kind of talk to you a little bit, start making my investments also. Other currencies were pegged to the dollar. And the idea was to stabilize currencies and encourage trade and rebuild war-torn economies that was in Europe. Since the U.S. had the largest economy and held most of the world gold's reserve, the dollar was seen as a stable, reliable choice. Now, the economic strength after World War II, when the U.S. emerged as the world's largest and most powerful economy, having largely escaped the devastation and effect of Europe and Asia. The U.S. has substantially industrial capacity. You know, we built a lot of things, you know, Ford, you know, some of you may not know Chrysler and Chevy. We were building those things in addition to our foundries. And we became the world's powerful economy. Having all of these things in place, we also became the leading global exporter, which made the dollar attractive for international trade and reserves. Now, the US dollar, as the countries rebuilt, they needed stable and easy convertible currency for international trade. And the dollar was chosen because of its stability and the US economic dominance. And additionally, since US was a major exporter and had close ties with many countries using the dollar in trade, it became a practical choice. Now, the end of the gold standard, you know, from 1944 up to 1970, what we found out is that a lot of countries were purchasing these commodities. And what they wanted to do was, when their country wasn't doing too well, they wanted to cash in the bonds. What we do every year when we want to fuel our economy, we let our bonds out to the global arena, and people buy our bonds, and it was backed by gold. So at a certain time when economies don't do well, people want to cash in those bonds, and we had to exchange their bonds for gold, which depleted our gold reserves. So in 1971, President Richard Nixon took the US off the gold standard, a move known as the Nixon shock. This ended the Bretton Woods system and directly convertibility of the dollar into gold. However, despite the change, the dollar maintained its role as the world's currency. And this is because of the sheer size and stability of the US economy. And I'll share some statistics with you about what our economy is, but I also want to talk about our debt, which is bringing us to the point that we are. Now, the US economy, in fact, that fueled what we consider petrodollar. And in the 1970s, the US made agreements with oil producing countries, especially Saudi Arabia, to price oil in the US in the dollar. And in exchange for the military protection and other benefits, these countries agreed to trade oil exclusively in our currency. This practice, known as a petrodollar system, it was interesting, but it ensured that the global demand for the dollar remained high because countries around the world needed the dollar to buy oil. But it also put a lot of countries into debt. So financial markets and the trust in the United States, including the Federal Reserve, became central to the global financial system. And the dollar is also supported by the strength of the US government debt, which is out of control. And we are considered now the least safe in the world. The US has maintained relatively low inflation, high levels of liquidity, and political stability, which has made for a trusted store of value, but that has all changed. Now, in summary, the dollar became the world's currency through a combination of historical events, economic, and strategic decisions by the US and other nations. It has not continued to hold the dominance due to its widespread use in trade, its status as gold reserve currency, and the trust in U.S. financial institutions. Now, with that history, it's important for you to understand the economic and the financial position of the United States and how we became the dominant country in the market in the world. But here is where we're at today, and I mentioned we're at a crossroad. As of January 2025, the U.S. national debt is over $36.2 trillion. This is the total amount of money that the federal government owes due to borrowing to cover budgets, deficits over the years. And I mentioned that every year, what we have to do is we have to fund our budget by issuing bonds. When we issue bonds, those bonds come with an agreement to pay interest on those particular bonds. Now, if you can imagine that $36 trillion in US dollars, not in rand, but in dollars, and you had to pay interest on those bonds each year. Our figure right now is that it takes over $1 trillion in order for us to service our debt to countries who own US bonds. That's the reason why China has risen. It's the reason why Brazil has risen and India has risen. Specifically Russia and Japan is our leading debtor, is because during this time, war becomes expensive. Let me say that conflict around the world becomes expensive. When you have all of these large ships, it takes fuel, but it also takes manpower. And when you have these jets flying off of these aircraft carriers from military bases, it costs the US per year an extensive amount of money. Our military budget is somewhere over $600 billion per year. And so the national debt, $36.2 trillion. But here's what you need to know. In terms of our economy, we only generate $4.44 trillion per year fiscally. Now, let's put that into context. You're working every day and you're making R1 million a year. But yet and still, you swipe your credit card because you like to travel the world, or for you young people, you saw this nice little girl that you probably want to be your wife. So you're using that credit card to take her into nice places and to, restaurants, and you're buying her nice gifts, and you run that credit card up to 30 million rand. It is inconceivable that your income will cover that debt. And the debt also adds to your cash flow problems because you have to pay interest on that debt. So to put it in layman's terms, or to put it in practical terms, we know that that's an unsustainable financial situation that you're in. And this is the reason where the United States is at. So when I talked about protectionism, what you see now is that the United States is starting to take, you probably heard this term that we're using now, is that America First, right? And America First is really all about making sure that, we deal with this debt. There's other issues that are going on here. And you probably heard after President Trump got elected, he made a lot of executive orders. And whether you like President Trump or not, the reality is that there are some Americans who agree with what he does. And let me share with you some of the things some of the executive orders that he put forward. The thing about same-sex marriage is big here in the United States, especially with conservatives or Republicans. And the federal government, the recognizing only two sexes right now, male and female, that's in support of 63% of the American population, the majority, and it's opposed by 37%. Another statistic is asking about deporting immigrants in the United States illegally. Most people agree with it. 60% are in favor and 40% are opposed. Similarly, 60% favor expanding oil and gas production. That means that, if you go on Google Maps right now, what used to be the Gulf of Mexico, you'll find out now it's named the Gulf of America. So this is the situation that we're in currently right now, where our United States president is doing some very interesting things, and it's impacting the relationship globally. So similarly, 60% favor oil drilling, not only in the Gulf of Mexico, but we get most of the things from Canada. And we're creating these unfortunate international incidences between our trading partners, between Canada and Mexico, which eventually some of us are just paying attention to find out how that might end up creating an instability right on our borders. And keep in mind, the United States have never experienced war on our soil other than an internal war, which was called the Civil War. And then the last statistic I'll tell you is that 59% favor declaring a national emergency due to the migrant crossings at the southern borders. So, and that's the one that gets me, right? Because as a businessman, that statistics on dealing with migrant crossings is one thing, but then Nkosi gave a very interesting statistics on Afrikaans who are coming into the country based upon an executive order that unfortunately President Trump did not consult South Africa and its diplomatic corps. I just met with your ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool, and I can tell you he is doing everything that he can to build better relationships with the U.S. during this trying time with the Republic. And one of the things that I think that is disappointing when you come to things like this is that he was never discussed with. He was never brought in. And we also have the U.S. Embassy and consulate there in South Africa that could have been consulted before a decision was made. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But one of the things that came out of it was positive, and that I'm hearing and that I'm seeing, is that the Afrikaners have rejected this. They said that, internally we are South Africans. What we are going to do is we're going to sit down and we're going to try to work these things out. And hopefully that is true, and hopefully that is sincere. And so what we do, fast forward, is this might be a rising time for South Africa. I mean, honestly, when you are dealt with these type of challenges, it takes people to become creative in order for them to think about long-term sustainability. Here in Wisconsin, and then Kosi had an opportunity to visit the Menominee tribe and the Stockbridge, Muncie, Banner Mohegan tribes here, along with the Oneida, the Potawatomi, and the Ho-Chunk. And we went to a powwow, and then Kosi got an opportunity to meet some of the folks who were leading those ethnic nations, because Native tribes here in the United States, they have sovereignty over their land. And what they're doing with their land currently right now is they're building solar farms, and they're raising their sacred animal, which is the bison, and they're doing security initiatives all through what they consider building casinos and taking the revenue from the casinos, which are enterprises for those particular nations, and reinvesting it back into their tribal sovereignty. And so this might be an opportunity for South Africa internally, based upon all of the negative rhetoric that has been described there. And sure, every nation has problems. I mean, if you take a look at the United States, we had the wildfires out west, right? Wiped out whole neighborhoods. We also have problems, with the open borders, where the deportation was very extreme gangs, organized cartels that had made it into this country. We have a bad epidemic of fentanyl in this country, and the whole issue of Christianity is now starting to rise among society. And so the question I want to pose is that, does this jar your creative mindset on saying, well, if countries are now starting to think about protectionism, what will it take South Africa to move in that particular direction? And that's an answer for the politician. That's an answer for your political leaders, to not only from President Ramaphosa's standpoint, but clearly there is another option that you actually have, and that is the business community. And what triggered all of this is the expropriation bill, where, and it's part of the Constitution, but unfortunately, our leaders didn't understand, or they failed to understand, or they didn't want to understand, because it may have been their strategic objective, and it could be led by what I consider an enemy from within. But all that being said, now is the time to become business savvy. Now is the time to build coalitions. Now is the time to build joint ventures. And that's the reason why I came to talk to you today, is because CashNet is interesting from a business standpoint to work with Nkosi. And why I'm there, let me park it and give him his props. You know, there's certain people who that just has it. We call it it, in show business. It's like, you got everything, man. I mean, you got the drive, you got the intellect, you got the passion, but most importantly, you got the faith. And that is right up our wheelhouse when it deals with CashNet and wanting to create partnerships. The government can actually do certain things, there's no doubt about it, but we know that the mining community in South Africa and throughout African countries deal in a whole different realm. And I think the private sector can actually assist in creating an economy that's going to be sustainable and not subject to international events. And one of them is the BRICS conference. I mean, I'm excited to come there and actually speak on this particular issue on collaboration. I call it, and some may have heard me coin it, but it's called the cultural collaboration that needs to happen. And you have to make sure, say it again, you have to be very careful about the enemy in the room. During the liberation movement, they call them Excaris. When things get real tough, what happens is people tend to start reflecting for themselves and not for the collective. And so when you're creating these type of things, it has to be part of that. The whole purpose has to be part of the collective, and it can't be about the individual. And there's a lot of money still out here in the global economy where people will try to buy you off. So in summary, why don't we sit down and figure out how we can collectively work together? And I'll give you some ideas. In CashNet, we have the issue, and CashNet is not a word, it's an acronym, as Guguletto mentioned, construction, agricultural, supply chain, technology, natural resources, energy, and textile. So I'm going to just pick out, maybe three of them. Construction. Every economy, every sovereign nation has to have infrastructure. And what we did with the Biden infrastructure bill, which was funded about $2 or $3 trillion, was it put our economy back on. All of the construction companies went out there, they identified infrastructure projects, the potholes. I remember, I'm going to digress just real quick, but good friend of mine up in KwaZulu-Natal, up in city of Mplatuzi. His name is Zeli Ngai. Zekele and I, we were very close. Just recently passed away a couple of years ago. And I remember when Zekele came to Wisconsin, he looked and says, man, y'all got holes bigger than we have. And I said, that is. And so that became every time we saw a pothole, that built our relationship. But Infrastructure is one of the ways that you can actually not only put people to work, but you can bring in the business community to help solve that problem. And that those infrastructures, I come home at least once a year. The other thing is agriculture. Everybody that's on this call, or most people that are on this call, I have to give you kudos. I have to give you all of the encouragement in this space as far as agriculture, because it's all about food sovereignty, but also it builds an opportunity for you to export into those countries that you actually have trade agreements in. So BRICS, US, I know everybody's talking about AGOA, but sometimes crisis forces you to get out of your comfort zone and solve these problems. And so those of you who are growing those things under the leadership of Amandla Omnotho, and also the Rural Chamber of Commerce and Industry, delve into it. And it's not, it's not a short-term sprint. This is going to be a long-term marathon. But you have to build that infrastructure from a business infrastructure point of view to really get long-term gains. We talked about co-ops, and the co-ops are so important is because it creates those things, what we consider uh, a collaborative effort in revenue generating for the masses and for those who are the stakeholders. And so co-ops, Guguletto can share with you the co-op that he visited that generates, close to $2-3 million a year. And it's about 5 farmers coming together. They built themselves a market. I would say sometimes it's better than what I see in Pick and Pay and Checkers and the rest of them. Nice fresh fruit. And this is where the locals would come to buy their merchandise. But it takes an investment. And sometimes those of us who are interested in creating this partnership, we would be able to seek that investment in order to have that happen. The other thing when it comes to the last thing I'll talk about is technology. And the technology is related not only to construction, whereas now we're using GPS and drones and mapping, Chat GPT, and all of these other things, AI in our industry, but also agriculture is using the same when it comes to spot feeding, and you have drones or your tractors that are feeding fertilizer and taking a look at soil samples and where the water is pooling and washing away the seeds, or where you have too much water where it's impacting your growth and it's attracting invasive bugs. Now drones are being used, and they're autonomous drones. You plot it out on the map, and the interesting thing about that is that data then becomes yours. So those are the 3 spheres that we will be talking about. Some of the long-term spheres we will be talking about is energy. We know that the Development Bank of South Africa, through Ambassador Rasul, built a pretty significant solar farm that dealt with South Africa's energy crisis that Eskom was trying to deal with. And it's good to hear that load shedding now is not as what it was when my wife and I used to come there about 5-6 years ago. So that attracts investments. And so from us, it won't make a difference because the passion that we have is not so much. We want to rate a return on our investment, but the underlying thing is that we want to build capacity in its people. And then I'll wrap it up here and say with you, there has to be a long-term strategy for the young people. 60% unemployment is unsustainable, and it's going to lead to a lot more instability in the country. And so with the investment of infrastructure development, you can put those young people to work, but you also can give them a trade. And let's get away from this issue of if you don't attend college and you don't get a degree, that you're not contributing to society. Africans built the United States, and it was built not when it was fair, It was built because we had no other choice. And we became good at what we do. And so you will find that that young person who may not like to go to school, he may need to make money, or he may need to provide for his family back in the rural areas. And then with these infrastructure development opportunities, you may be able to flip the script and put them back to work, but also stabilize and deal with that unemployment issues. So with that being said, I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for your all of your commitment to the Republic of South Africa, which has become my second home. But most importantly, always bet on you. Always bet on you. Thank you, my brother. Sizibonana Maznia.
Thank you so much, Palatwayo. I love your parting words that always bet on you. This is very interesting, the nuggets you just shared with us. And thank you, Bonisile. That is agility by Dr. Amandla Lamba. We must applaud Dr. Lamba for his great work and invention. And we know that he's got partners, I think, in the States. I follow him on his Facebook page for his agility business. Thank you, Palatwayo. The things you've said are very crucial. The debt to GDP ratio, the debt of $36.2 trillion is staggering. Actually, the US owes quite a lot of countries, as you have mentioned, Japan, China, and others. And as well as, to just come to understand what exactly is driving the president of the United States. I always say this, that if President Trump says America first, I don't know why would other people have problems with that, because they must themselves say Africa first or China first. But again, as you rightfully pointed out, we are a global community. Someone got to find ways of working together. We are not into politics. That is for politicians to really talk to those issues and iron them out and shackle all the necessary diplomacies that needs to be shackled for us to work together and move forward. But given, granted, America is still a great country and a leader on many fronts, especially when it comes to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Technological is why we are sitting here right now talking through these gadgets, because of the power of America and the ability for them to drive quite a lot of frontiers. It's a bit sad, though, that we have a situation, and I'm happy you mentioned that our compatriots, the Afrikaners, they rejected being given the status of being refugees. Imagine people who are running the economy of South Africa at the moment. But this economy, truth be told, is run by white people, and as well as Afrikaners in the main. They are producing food, they are running technology, your NASPers, they are running quite a lot of things. And we always have these light-hearted talks with them on the sides to say, hey, you guys, you're going to be, imagine, for us to be a refugee, you go to a shack, you stay there because your country is rejecting you, something to that effect. Imagine you moving people from their mansion to become refugees. I was very happy that they outrightly rejected that. There's nothing like that. I think it's disinformation and misinformation. And sadly, as I was busy commentating on my media houses in the past few weeks around this very issue, I met an American white lady, and I met her on the passage in Rosebank. So she overhears me talking on radio about this thing, and she says, "Are you worried?" And I'm saying, "No, I'm just commentating." And then she says to me, "Do you know who is bringing problems to us?" And I'm saying, she says, "It is your 3 South African billionaires who are supporting the president." But it's very interesting. She was really explaining it. And it's sad that a person that we hold in high regard, having been born in Pretoria, Elon really does not seem to understand what's happening. Maybe he left South Africa too early, before 1994. We have got our own problems, race-based economy, and that is a given. But we've got to find ways. We can't be on each other's throats all the time or kill each other. As you said, war should never be an option when it comes to these things. And I believe our leaders globally will never succumb to that. And to have a South African who peddle lies, talk about things that are not real, it's very, very sad. But be that as it may, I want us to engage you, Patwayo. I want us to ask questions and get my audience here to talk to you and to ask questions. And I'm happy, as you mentioned, before they come, please do raise your hands as I'm preparing you, as you're raising your hands. We have signed an MOU between ourselves as a Rural Chamber of Commerce and Industry, together with CASNET. So I'm very excited about that. I'll announce when I'm going to see Mr. Davis Qwabe, because he's coming to South Africa very soon. And the AGOA African Growth and Opportunity Act is being reviewed this year. And it's going to be very interesting to see what will come out of that. And I'm seeing some writing on the wall based on what is happening currently. But it's things like those that should never let us, shrink as a people. And you have cast out very clearly what you think are areas of collaboration, construction, cooperatives, especially as you mentioned, technology and other stuff. And thank you so much. I'm going to allow 3 hands, if you may, Pakatwayo, with your pen that side, just write those questions so that we take 3 at a time, and then you then respond. Her Royal Highness Ndlunkulu Nosipho, may I kindly hand over to you, followed by Tana Tswa Victor Ndoro from Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Nonkosi. A special greetings to Sir Joseph Davis Qwabe. And then I would like to greet the agricultural stakeholders as well. Sir, for me, I have so many questions, but I will just give you 2. I'm not going to expand on them. The first question I would like to ask is how can we better support small-scale farmers and promote equitable access to markets, resources, and technology? That's question number 1. And then number 2, and the last one, I will say what role can international cooperation and agreements such as the Sustainable Development Goals, which is SDGs, play in promoting sustainable agriculture and reducing hunger? That's my submission. Thank you, Nonkosi.
Your Royal Highness, thank you so very much. I hope, Pakatwayo, you captured that. I'm trying as well on my side. And Mr. Tana Tswa Victor Ndoro. Just unmute yourself, Mr. Ndoro, and then speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Guguletu. Thank you so much, Dr. Joseph Davis, for this wonderful presentation that we have heard. So my question is he was talking about the trading of South Africa with USA. So I just want him to relate to Zimbabwe. As you all know, that Zimbabwe has got some good climatic conditions, good soils in terms of the quality of the product that can come out from Zimbabwe. So what the relationship can we make with the countries like USA? As you all know that we are not in good books because of Zimbabwe has been sanctioned. It's under sanctions by this USA. So this actually a good thing. I think it may be a good thing for Zimbabwe to export with these big countries. As you all know that we are all Africans. Probably we might even export to US South Africans, then you can export to USA, or either we can how can you link up with USA? That's my question. And also about these technologies of drones and so on. How can especially the people in Zimbabwe can have access to these specialized equipment? So that's my another question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndoro. Is there any one person who would like to ask a question? Zippo, I see your phone is, your mic is on. Okay, let's get back to you, Palatwaya, to respond to those questions. If you can kindly unmute, and then let's
I'm here. Okay.
Thank you.
So, the first question was, how can we support small farmers in technology? You know, it's here are small farmers in the U.S., and I think it's because of common interests. They come together and they meet on a regular basis. And what they've come up with through this co-op system is that there's areas that have not been served. I remember maybe about in 2015, I was at the embassy here in Washington, D.C., and I made the suggestion that whoever solves the problem of the economy in the townships are going to be very, very, it's going to not only fuel the economy in South Africa, but it's going to place that particular entity in a very good financial position. Unfortunately, what I've seen is that some of the grocery stores, major chains of grocery stores, just put different brands in there, right? They're still affiliated with the major grocery stores. I mean, like Boxer. They've taken the Walmart playbook and they've created subsidiaries, but yet and still they're still part of the supply chain. And so when you think about things like that, I want you to consider this, is that wherever there's a need, there's an opportunity. And it's not one silver bullet that's going to tell you what you can do, but what must happen is first access to capital. Those particular individuals who are farmers must understand that they're running a business. So they must understand cash flow and income balance statement sheets and supply chain also. And the most important thing is that how do you reinvest your revenue capital back into your business for a pro-growth strategy? So those are the things that I would say how you can support small farmers. I never question the business that if they can actually do what their passion is. What I normally question is that how well are you a business owner that you can monitor your cash flow? How you can really focus on profit margin loss, or are you doing a profit and loss statement? Because that's going to share with you where your greatest needs are at. So that's number one. Build better businesses, because farmers here in the United States, they're definitely business, they're business leaders. The difference is here is that the small farmers are funded by USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And just a side note, there has to be equity in the agriculture industry, because if it's not equity, meaning that Black farmers farmers have the same access to capital as some of the white farmers, we're going to continue to be in this situation. And if it's funded the right way, I think those co-ops, in addition to private investment, you have to have a hybrid approach. I think they can do very well. Sustainable goals as far as farmers are concerned. I'm going to mention this, and sometimes I don't think people hear it the right way, but I'm going to share it anyway. Some of these international organizations have not done well when it comes to supporting those in certain geographical regions throughout the world. And I'll share this with you. Be very careful of the money that you seek and the deals that you sign, because sometimes they're not good for your business. Sometimes they're not good for your country. And I'll just say that the World Bank and the IMF, as I mentioned before, as the rise of the dollar, there will come some concessions based upon access to that capital. So you have to be very careful when you're dealing with international organizations, because I think we remember international organizations in Rwanda and currently right now in the Democratic Republic of Congo, how international organizations can say one thing but turn around and do something else. On the question of Zimbabwe, hey, my brother, you guys have weathered a storm over there, and I'm glad to hear that you're coming out on the side where it's sunshine. I'm going to have to be very candid with you, though. When we put tariffs and when we actually have sanctions against a country, sometimes it even prohibits those particular commodities to be imported into the country. Otherwise, what happens is that the United States government can then charge you for not keeping the international agreement. But what I would say is that through the relationships that we have with Amandla Omnotho and some of the other trade deals, let's see if we can find other markets that are just as, that would put you in a very good position on selling your product, and then do an assessment of, market share. How will you gain entry into the market, and what is currently right there that you would have to compete with, and then what is the cost that you would have to encumber in order for you to become involved in this international trade. And it's not easy, but shipping costs, a distributor that's in that country, all of those things, you're going to have to figure out what that cost will be. And we would, through our chairman of CastNet, Charles Johnson, I can tell you that he comes from the supply chain arena. So those type of analysis can be done, and we can definitely work together for you to gain access to, and I'll say once again, your trading partners: Brazil, Russia, India, China. Look at those markets. The U.S. market, if you're able to succeed in those particular markets, then when you come to the U.S., now you have a calling card saying that you're already distributing to other countries. But what happens is, I think here in our country, we call it, a one-trick pony. A pony can only do one trick, and after a while, you get bored, right? So you're going to have to be very nimble, and you're going to have some diversity in your revenue stream when you start dealing in this international trade issues. But we can talk a little bit more because offline through Nkosi, because I think that's a very interesting suggestion that you gave. But it's also, I'm glad to hear that you're, just because the diplomatic relationships have soured with Zimbabwe, that doesn't mean that the people in America does not support the people in Zimbabwe. Oh, one last thing, Nkosi, he talked about drones and technology.
That's right.
Here in the United States, I think we have those particular type of vehicles that are available, and manufacturers that are available, but things are costly here in the United States. And then you have to think about actually getting them there in order for you to utilize them. But you know, there's other manufacturers throughout the world, and you know, China has a manufacturer and a product through what they call DJI, and you know, they are a very, very reliable aircraft that you can do a lot of things with. So here in the U.S., we do have those markets, and we certainly can, if you're interested in gaining access to it, absolutely. But there's other markets around here. And then last thing I will say with the questions is that I think we've come to the point where everything will become free. Nothing ever was free. I mean, you might get the money, but you know, you had to compromise, right? But with this issue that we're going through right now with USAID or USAID, it gives you a very good understanding. And if you're not familiar with it, type in USAID. Our government currently right now is wiping out, or is in the process of wiping out, that whole department within its U.S. government. And you know, they were the face of our philanthropy throughout the world and our government. And so it just shows you the critical situation that we're here when it comes to financing and our national debt. Hopefully I covered all of those, Ngozi.
Hey, thank you. You've covered them, my brother. This is so interesting. You know, the austerity. We have austerity time and again as well here, where belts have to be tightened to make sure that there is not wasteful expenditure. I think the US is going through exactly that. And thanks for really sharing that with us, because at times, you know, people just think decisions are made abruptly. It's all because it's in the interest of the sovereign state. And I really believe that any president or any person would act in a certain way to protect the interest of their own citizens. But thanks for sharing that with us. Before I would obviously give you some minute to say some parting short words, but I just want to make sure that I acknowledge the comments that are on the chat box. There's somebody who commented about the drones. We've got a lot of stock theft in South Africa. It's almost like a business. That's why people are now resorting to taking law into their own hands, which is bad. But sometimes you sympathize with people when they've got their 100 cows stolen. In my own family, I think we've had over 30 goats stolen, over 20 cows stolen in the past few years. So that just should tell you about the level of stock theft that's happening in South Africa. Hopefully the drone technology and other technologies are going to be useful, and maybe tracking devices of some sort, so that you do not have, you sort of minimize this type of a situation. And then I think some of the comments that have come through there, obviously we'll add you to the WhatsApp group. We'll give you our WhatsApp number. People were talking about agility, and somebody said all over the world, actually, there's issues, and Trump is like our elder brother, our own Julius. He's too much energetic. Information session, thank you. And then continued, thank you so much for those who are commending and appreciate that. And obviously, that the last one is from DT's phone. 4 years is both very short and intractably long time, given President Trump's confrontational approach to foreign policy. Why should business enemy target countries toward the US and not BRICS and other dispensations instead? How can the civil rights movement structure and other civil formations are sympathetic to our cause and better informed on dynamics of our politics be persuaded and approached to join forces against the dominant billionaire political discourse. In the parting words, I will sort of like give us his views right there. Thanks, Dr. Marange. Amandla Omnotho is through Global African Herbal Solutions, open direct market access with highly demanded organic products, especially medicinal herbs in Germany in particular. Thank you, Qwabe, for clarity. Thanks, Sis Linda, long time. May we have a few words from our Nigerian brothers and sisters. Thank you. We have reached the end of this. Before I hand over to Palatwa, just to have something of parting words, I have got my friends. The other one was still on the plane that would love to say something before we close. That is Dr. Primrose Fakudze. You know her. She was dealing with sheer matter. She's a neurologist and all of that. We have been telling you, and Miss Tutu Samuel, I'm sure she has, landed. If she hasn't, Dr. Primrose will give us just a brief about what's cooking up there in Nigeria. When are we coming over? Dr. Just unmute your mic, Doc, and then say a few words, and then we give to Palatwa and close. Dr. Primrose. I'll actually try and raise it on the side. But Palatwa, maybe your last words, having heard some of these comments, and what is it that you'd like to leave us with? I've said to people, you are coming to our BRICS conference, 27th, 29th of March. For those that would like to meet you, I'm sure they'll meet you there, and actually would like to meet you there so that we discuss these things and finalize on these agreements. Your words.
Well, my final words are going to be kind of like the uncle who has been very focused on unfair situations. The United States right now is not a compassionate country. What they're focused on is fixing the problems internally that has been systemic for a long term. And so when we used to say that we care about countries and all of those other things, you're starting to hear a lot of negative rhetoric that is coming from the country. And that is all because of protectionism. I'll use that word a lot. And understand what protectionism creates. It creates a person or an entity that will continue to think about self-grandiose and forget about everything else. And so this is where the country in which we live in and the rhetoric that you hear coming from, and the partners that have been established globally have decided this is what they do in order for them to protect their way of life. Because it used to be, the dollar was superior to just about everything that was out there. Now we're finding out that because of inflation, the dollar is starting to lose its value. And this affects a lot of people, even some of those who may have origins in South Africa, but now is somewhere else. Investments, people are looking at their investments, and if things are becoming a lot more expensive, they have to cover that cost somewhere. And so just get into the mindset that it is like when Chris Hani understood the position that he was in, and at all costs, he said, he thought that this is what I have to do in order for us, for order for the people to survive. And he did it. And I think South Africa right now is at those crossroads. And that is, you have to make sure that you network, you become very strategic, you have to be creative, and you have to always make sure that you put the next generation first. In the Native American communities, the Oneida, they have this saying of 7 generations. They say that the leaders always make a decision based upon the next 7 generations. And I challenge my brothers and sisters in South Africa to do the same. Thank you, my man.
Thank you so much, my brother. Very wise words, and truly appreciate those very, very great, inspiring words for us to do better. And I must appreciate that here in this group, we have members of the royal family and some from the political parties who attend, members of parliaments from different countries, especially our country here and other countries in SADC. Truly appreciate, and thanks Your Royal Highness for raising that. We've got Prince Johnson Odeniran from Ile Ife Land, Arile Odudukwa Kingdom. You're welcome, Prince. We are definitely honored to have you and many others, prince and princesses from different kingdoms. Dr. Fakudze, are you able to open now, just to have a few words?
I greet everyone. Thank you so much. What a very, very wonderful presentation today. We are all inspired, and I greet the people from Eswatini. It is really has motivated me. I'm currently in Nigeria, but the team from Eswatini, with what they have done, developing Amandla Omnotho back home, has really inspired me to come and do something like similar to what Amandla Omnotho has done in Swatini here in Nigeria. So thank you so much, Mr. Xaba, for all your encouragement, the things that you do for us in Africa, so that we can be able to stand in our own and just bring the economy to our own hands. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doc. We shall be going there immediately after our BRICS conference, but just for turmeric and medicinal herbs things with Mr. Magumbi and Dr. Marange. And as well as in September, we have confirmed our launch of Amandla Omnotho in Nigeria. You shall be made aware so that you can come with. And our Dubai trip is still pending. We'll definitely be informing you as to what's going to be happening going forward. The announcements. Turmeric training is happening on the 23rd, starting in Limpopo, and 25th, we are going to be in Gauteng, and 27th, we're going to be in KwaZulu-Natal. So thank you so much. We've had a very good number, literally 80 people now who have registered to do turmeric training, and we're excited that the markets have opened up even in South Africa, not only overseas markets, and this makes our heart very warm to realize that our program of action is materializing so well. It's like people and the markets have been waiting for it. And we've got the best brains coming to teach us. You may have noted that we are changing our strategy and focusing on developing specific people with specific interests in particular sectors and subsectors of the economy. And soon we shall be having the footwear cluster masterclass. You know that we have created some manufacturing facilities for those for footwear in South Africa, and we're doing that as well in Eswatini. There's huge investment coming to Eswatini. Will be able to announce that in time with, interestingly, with the US MIT, colleagues over there in the States. And there will obviously be property master classes, which will be announced, wherein we want people to come in and be able to play in the space of property, commercial, residential, and industrial. So we shall be announcing all of those things very soon. Thank you so much, and we truly appreciate that you've been able to come and join us and dedicate your time. For those that listen to radio, I'm on Ukhozi FM this coming Wednesday at 8:20, talking economy and entrepreneurship, and on Highway Radio tomorrow in the evening, and other radio stations will always update you on where we are at in terms of the economic development. Thank you so much, Nakenza, and God bless you. All of you have a great week ahead.
Please don't forget